Good morning, everyone. My name's Gary Dixon. I'm Digital and Design Manager at SFHA today. And today we've got a session on Microsoft-led digital transformation. It's a webinar, and in this session we will be guiding you through the main pillars of starting the process of Microsoft-led digital transformation, assessing the application sprawl, prioritising applications that are a barrier to adapting to the new normal, build a small proof of concept, and then roll out in quick succession. So all the kind of key initial steps that you should be thinking about when going on this journey. This sessions came about, and I know it's not the only route to digital transformation change, but it's been very clear from the initial results from our SFHA digital checkup, which we have launched, and it's been something that the membership actively wants to engage in. And that just leads me on to a quick point. If any of the members here today, if you do get the chance and you've not done it already, please have a go at our digital checkup tool for housing associations. We've already had 40 members complete the checkup, and out of that, what they've received is a digital maturity score, as well as an evaluated follow-up from myself. So just jumping on to housekeeping before we get into the session. The webinar will be recorded today, and it will be made available to all attendees in the coming days. Stephen's presentation deck, that will also be available when we send out post information. Today we'll also be trying to get a little bit of engagement from you all, so there'll be one or two questions as well as polls. The questions, if possible, we can get you to answer them in the chat function, or if it's something you're very much wanting to ask Stephen directly, we can invite you to come on screen and ask Stephen. So if there are any questions as well, you can put them in the Q&A panel, which is down the bottom, and it's on the right hand side button. Just before we kick off and I introduce Stephen, we've got one question which we think would be good to just get a general feel for the kind of the audience today, and it's, we want to get thoughts from everyone on what you're looking to get out of today's session. If you want to let us know what you're hoping to get covered, we can try and also cover it at the end if Stephen doesn't in his presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Stephen Osprey. He is Director of Microsoft Solutions at TSG, and he's going to be going through a presentation. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Gary. Morning, everyone. Hope we're all doing well. Yes, as Gary said, there is a poll on your screen on Zoom, so if you could add your thoughts into that, that would be great. Usually with these sessions, it's quite good to try and understand where you guys are at and any particular things you're looking to get, or objectives, or any insights from it. So please just share what you're trying to get out of the session, and I'll do my best to cover it as much as I can. So in terms of who I am, so as Gary said, I'm the Microsoft Solutions Director for TSG. Long story short, I've been with TSG 15 years. Through that time, there's been an awful lot of evolution of the technology stack in general, and specifically in Microsoft. We, in terms of our business and into housing associations, I'll just flash up some of our background there. We work with an awful lot of housing associations across the UK. We started specialising in housing about three and a half years ago properly. And really what we found was housing associations were very advanced in some areas in terms of the technology adoption, but actually very behind the eight ball, and quite behind the commercial sector and an awful lot of other areas. So we were able to sort of use some of our expertise that we've got in our commercial sector into housing. It was very well received. And I think the reason for that, really, when you look at it from the top down, is we're a kind of end-to-end Microsoft partner. So everything from Azure through these kind of key bits here that we've highlighted: productivity, ERP and finance, Dynamics, sales and service management and BI, we can kind of do the whole end-to-end story. And that was quite attractive for organisations like these guys on screen that we're trying to digitally transform. And I've got my colleague Kirsty in the call, who in the Q&A section can answer any question you've got around these particular engagements that we've got with these clients. Again, some more names that you might have heard of, and these guys are on various parts of their digital transformation journey, some really advanced, some in year 3 of quite aggressive strategies, and others really just starting to define it. So agenda, so yeah, that question that's gone out really is just for me to try and gather the thoughts from around the digital table, if you like, in terms of what your objectives are. So if the guys have collected any responses, just feel free to shout them out in terms of stuff that people want to see covered or maybe have explained. The kind of static content, the pillars content I'll go through as a basics of what is digital transformation and why is it a thing, effectively. And then second point is why the Microsoft platform as a technology platform to achieve that. Third point there is key steps to get your digital transformation moving. So understanding what it is one part, but actually how do you get the thing off the ground is a key one. And we'll talk a little bit about that and about strategic planning and sort of gaining sponsorship from around the organisation. And then what we'll do is we'll cover what some of the other HAs are doing right now, what they've achieved and what a typical sort of before and after looks like for our guys. And then we'll cover sort of key takeaways and next actions before we do the Q&A. So the first thing I want to cover is really just why digital transformation is effectively a thing. And really you have to sort of rewind in time a little bit to understand where we've came from before you understand where we are. So like I said, I've been in technology now for 15 years and the world's changed an awful lot. If you wind back 15 years ago, this was pretty much the sort of spend to business fit chart back then. And what I mean by that is the yellow line in spend represents money spent over time. So traditionally, you would have had to purchase a bunch of hardware, a bunch of servers, some consultancy time, and a business system. So that would have been, a chunk of capex, cash out the door, to achieve that business fit. So that nice tight fit between the yellow line and the green line. The green line is the business fit. So that technology investment that you made 15 years ago, for example, got you to where you needed to be and got you that nice fit. But what happened is because that was an on-premise system and largely didn't really get touched for 4 years, so then you see that flat line of 4 years pass, the actual fit of that thing that you've bought dropped off as your organization changed. So then what happens is after 4 or 5 years, you have to do another large investment. So another chunk of servers, another chunk of technology, another chunk of consultancy to get that fit back again. And that process repeated itself basically every 4 or 5 years on this large refresh cycle. So any of you that have been in or around this world of technology and business systems will recognise that. And really what's happened now is the world's changed, where effectively anything's possible. And with my Microsoft hat on, I would say anything's possible with Microsoft, but there are a few kind of technology platforms out there that are getting towards that same area. We believe Microsoft is the strongest part of that, but I'll explain why. So these sort of hexagons at the bottom really represent the different chunked off business areas that any organisation has, including housing. So, so really everything from security and compliance through to electronic document management, business process and workflow BI, the whole kit and caboodle effectively. And really with the cloud technologies now, what we're seeing is, yes, there's a capital spend at the very start, that spike, to get into the platform. But effectively, once you've done that and you're in the cloud platform, yes, there's a higher operational expenditure, but that really kind of tracks at quite a predictive level, mapping quite nicely to that business fit. So as your organization changes, the cloud platforms, they're self-upgrading, they get enhanced functionality regularly, and you can sort of tweak them and change them to map whatever's happening in your business with little small increases in your OPEX and small CAPEX spends. So that's a much more gradual, much more sustainable spending profile rather than the sort of big hits. And another benefit of that is that you can do any of these projects and address any of these critical business areas that you've got in really in any order, which sounds a little bit bizarre, but sort of back in the old days, you would have had to build your finance system first, then your CRM system, then your housing management platform, then your document management system, and then your reporting in sort of a linear way. Whereas now we don't have to do that. We've actually got some projects where we're actually doing the stuff at the end first, because that has the biggest benefit to organisations. They want the BI platform first, so that's fine. And the technology is available to plumb that into older systems as they transition out of those. So that's a real key bit. So I get asked an awful lot after that in terms of, well, if anything's possible and you can do anything at any time, where do we start? And now we're starting to get into why digital transformation is a thing. Really, what we recommend is that you start where the biggest ROI is, effectively. So this is just a bit of a mind map that we did with a customer in terms of, well, what are the key standout pain points? So looking across the entire processes of the organisation, where are the key pain points? Where's the areas that you can make the most improvement and have the most impact in your organisation? And effectively, the agile process that we advocate is pick 4. It doesn't have to be 4, but 4 is a nice number usually. So in this example, these are the 4 kind of hot areas that have the biggest ROI. They're the priorities. And we call those the sort of customer requirements and strategic aims. And what we do with those 4 is we effectively bake those 4 in to this agile digital transformation process. And really that starts at the top left with sort of design and transition. So we sort of specify, let's take projects as an example. We specify how we're going to address the project's problem. We look at the security and compliance piece of that, because that's obviously critical you get that right. We then move into sort of a discovery phase and analyse. So we then analyse what it is we need to put in place. We then deliver very, very quickly. So we could spin up a 1 user of Dynamics, for example, build agile build a process around your projects, give it to your guys to sort of test in a proof of concept or a pilot. And then only really once that's been signed off by those guys would we move into sort of improvement. So typically what happens is after a couple of weeks, we hand over the sandbox environment. We get a lot of feedback from your guys to say, half of it we love, the other half we hate. We then go and tweak it and amend it. And then after a very quick period of time, a month, 2 months, you end up with a minimum viable product that actually works to replace the old system or the manual process that you've got. And then it sort of loops back around into that discovery phase again. And then you move on to the next stage and then pick off the next problem and the next problem. And through that iterative type of process, you end up with a kind of built system ready to go live at your leisure. And then once you've done that for projects, you then move on to the capturing information project, which could be an app or something to collect information for block inspections or something like that. Sharing knowledge might be a problem in the business you want to chew off, or a full HR system. Whatever it happens to be, the process remains the same. Discover, analyse it, deliver very quickly, and then move into improve, and then back around to discover again. So that's the process in general, and why do we think that Microsoft is the right platform to do that? Well, I'll run you through this. This again is a little bit of history. So historically, any decisions that an organisation was making around platform identity and database was really an IT director type decision. So if you're putting a server in, it was probably going to be Windows, probably going to be Active Directory to user, so logging on effectively in security. And then sort of files and data was typically going to be in a SQL database, might be another third party one, but effectively that platform decision was made by IT. And then the business apps decisions were really outsourced to the heads of each department. So the head of operations would make your housing management decision, potentially your head of finance would make your finance system decision, and so on and so forth with HR and the likes. Nowadays, those individuals absolutely are stakeholders in the process, but we typically like to see a technology strategy over all of this piece to make sure that no one individual departmental decision detracts from the overall strategy. And what that gets you is effectively a platform that can integrate left and right, so natively works on the chosen database, Active Directory, Windows Server, obviously, but actually works with everything to the right of that. So this thing, Office 365. Other things in there that are important is on the document management side. Again, we like to see something like SharePoint in there, but I mean, it doesn't have to be SharePoint, but anything kind of structured that adheres to this design tenet of, does it work with everything left of that business apps line? Will it integrate fully with Office 365? And because Microsoft have this in mind, all of the off-the-shelf Microsoft tools natively work with each other. And technology people, when they look at this diagram, they kind of get it, but financial directors, chief execs, they quite rightly ask, so what? Why should I care, kind of thing? And there's three reasons why they should care. One is database. So whichever of these hexagons you choose to deploy from the Microsoft stack, they all live in the same database, something called a common data service. So all in the cloud, all the data lands in the same place. Why that's important is workflow. So this grey area is the kind of workflow layer. So Power Automate is extremely strong as an offering, and it comes actually free with your Office 365 tenancy, which most of you probably aren't using. But really, if you are doing any process that cuts across these different business systems, you can actually automate the repetitive stuff. So a great example would be onboarding a new staff member, where perhaps you create a Power App in Office 365, embed that in your website. The new start or the person applying for the job might fill that in. Once they've completed that, that might send a task through to Active Directory, find out who your HR director is and send them that task. Once that HR director has agreed that that is a satisfactory candidate, they could then move it to the next stage of the workflow, which is perhaps to look at diaries and book an interview. Once that interview is booked and perhaps the candidate's successful, the workflow would then kick in and say, well, send a task to the IT director to go and source a laptop, and then you can actually use Power Automate to go and create a new Active Directory user. So set up their email account, get all of their IT ready for them. So you can make that as complex or as simple as you like across any business process, as long as you're architecting your business or your organization in this way, then you can do that type of thing with automation. The second reason why you should care is business intelligence, and that's not reporting. I stress that quite heavily. So reporting for me is any kind of static reports you get out of any one of these hexagons above. BI is a tool that is plugged into the common data service. So it can see all data, whether that is the Teams channels you've got, the SharePoint files you have, anything within your line of business system, i.e. your housing management platform, anything within finance, SQL, the lot. And its job, yes, it's got to give you your kind of monthly KPIs and stuff, the nice dashboard, but really BI's job is to spot stuff that you don't. So you want your business intelligence platform to spot correlations and flag them up and say, hey, did you know that every September your turnover increases by X at the same time as your staff numbers go down by Y? Is there causation here? And really that should be working for you in the background. And then the last thing that CXOs tend to care about is the whole integrity and compliance piece. So Microsoft are big enough and ugly enough. They've got the largest data center set up in the world in Azure. And they can say things like anything that you store within this platform will give you the tools to be fully compliant. So whether your compliance pushes you down the route of ISO compliance or any kind of government hoops to jump through, or GDPR, or God forbid whatever legislation is going to come out of Brexit that affects you, this platform will be able to have it, and you'll have one sort of admin area to be able to put those policies in place and sort of automatically govern that and make sure that you adhere to that across the piece. As far as integrity and security goes, Microsoft spend more on security than most countries, and it's going to be significantly more secure than any mere mortal any mere individual business or HA can afford. So those are the three big reasons why people should care. So in terms of how do we get this thing moving? This is typically the type of exercise that I would run through. It's an abridged version, but when we run these sort of digital strategy sessions with our HAs, this is what we run organisations through. And it's a bit of a test in terms of the maturity of the strategy that's out there. So the first pillar there at the top, the first box, is the org strategy. So how strong is that? So we typically would like to see some kind of statement or mission statement. So this example here I've got is ABC Limited. They aim to provide our customers with the best and most efficient experience in our sector. So, okay, that's fine, but we would look to have some kind of measurable objectives against that strategy. So usually we find in mature strategies, they would have broken that down, for example, into these two areas. So improve customer experience by X%, reduce operating costs by Y%, something measurable that we can achieve. Underpinning that, for me, a valid technology strategy has to map directly into the org strategy. So the technology strategy could be something like ABC Limited will leverage technology to systematically remove manual process to reduce cost and or improve customer experience. Again, a lovely statement, but what does that mean? And those two bullets there could say, provide all Z staff with instant access to accurate customer data securely and remotely, and then replace manual processes in the sales and fulfillment cycles with automation where possible. So practical go-dos, and that list could be as long as you like. Underneath that technology strategy, this is where the sort of meat of digital transformation happens, and that's in what we call a program of work. And that program of work, I've heard people call that their digital transformation program or various other names, but effectively that's the overarching governance model that looks after multiple projects typically. So a program of work will cover, for example, CRM modernization, Office 365 migration, workflow, business intelligence for all, HMS modernization, blah, blah, blah. So however many that you want to have in that. And that program of work usually spans multiple years. And then underneath that, you've got these individual projects, so lots and lots of projects. So for example, I've said here, the projects that support the CRM modernization program are CRM phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so the actual practical go-dos. And just this note here is just a bit of a takeaway that I tend to leave senior decision makers, and this is, we're now getting into the whole winning sponsorship and around the exec table. We believe, and we've seen, that technology is now at a stage where it should really be considered as a resource to achieve and support organisational goals. But in the businesses and the HAs that we see that are further down the line on digital transformation than others, typically they recognise that. They recognise that around the boardroom sort of table or the trustee table, there is a recognition that if you have a business problem, whatever that happens to be, technology deserves its say in order to try and help out. So historically, if there's an organisational problem or some issue or some, trying to achieve customer experience, for example, the chief exec or whoever's in charge would look around the board table and say, right, how can we solve that with people, i.e. HR? How can we solve that with operations, i.e. the operations team? How can we solve that, with funding from the financial director? But we believe that technology deserves its say in that as well. And that's why we're seeing quite a lot of these business transformation directors, heads of data, CIOs, as well as CTOs now at boardroom level to sort of advocate for technology having its say. And that really reflects the kind of central role that society has for technology as well. So before we get into what other...
I was just going to jump in there. You're doing great. It was just that we'll pop up poll 1 just now, just to get
go for it.
Just after that slide there. So there's a quick poll, everyone on screen, and it's just about what your the clarity of your organisational strategy at the moment. It'd be good to find out where you think you are at the moment, and we'll pop up poll too, just very shortly as well. So just click your answer and submit, and we'll feed that into the question and answer session at the end. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gary. And have you got any feedback from the guys from the first one in terms of anything they want covered, just so I can take a note?
Not yet, but I'll pop it in if there is anything that comes up, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Just feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so in terms of what other housing associations are doing, let's get into that. So this is very much I've taken the names out of it, but this is very much an example of an as-is state. So this particular housing association customer that we've got, this is a very high level summary of the business analysis effectively that we did. And what this does is share, oops, as that poll pops up, what this does is share where that organisation was at the start of the exercise. So on the left-hand side, they had customers and suppliers having a quite an inconsistent experience. So in terms of, as I get my pointer out, in terms of if they phoned in versus emailed in versus looked at the website, etc., dealt with someone that was on site, they were getting quite an inconsistent experience for customers and suppliers. Their organisation had sort of a traditional IT support model supporting quite a lot of different applications. Some were quite tightly integrated and others weren't. So this particular organisation had Capita from an operations and HMS point of view, with Sun Systems on finance, Documotive from documents and legal compliance point of view, and then they had a standalone HR system, standalone customer service, and standalone sales and marketing with a very small integration back to Capita, and really quite a lot of white space here for kind of manual effort. So really a lot of word and paper flying around, a huge amount of manual effort in terms of rekeying and dealing with issues manually, huge amounts of Excel and huge amounts of email to sort of plug the gaps. And really what that drove was, as well as the general inefficiency, was quite inconsistent decision making. So they were getting reports out of Capita and reports out of Sun, and then a whole bunch of Excel dumps. Really what happened is at the operational head meetings or the board meetings or whatever, people were arriving with their own different data sets, their own report about how profitable the department had been, or how efficient the tenant management side was, or how efficient operations were. And really most of the meeting was spent arguing about who had the best report or right information, which was obviously not great. So the sort of 2B state, so the end state, the nirvana that they're aiming to get to, and they're about halfway through that journey, is they want to have a single consistent experience for customers and suppliers, and we're advocating Dynamics for that, to give them that sort of front end. So whether they phone in, use a portal, log on the website, or even speak to somebody on site, they're getting that uniform experience, and whoever they speak to has the most up-to-date information about that particular tenant or that supplier. Their technology status has a kind of modern managed services approach, where it's moulded around the resources that they've got, as well as drawing in expertise from a partner. Through the assessment, actually Capita was a good fit for what it was they were trying to do on the HMS. But really their finance they were kind of underwhelmed with, so we're looking at sort of Dynamics 365 Business Central for that, and an integration back. They weren't particularly happy with Documotive. It was, for them, it was particularly expensive, and lacked a lot of the modern functionality and compliance pieces that they needed, particularly around enterprise document records management. So we used Office 365 for that. They had existing licensing, and we really just sweat that asset a bit more, put some time and effort into that, deep integration into finance. And then as far as HR is concerned, looked at Dynamics HR for them. That was a good fit. Again, natively, because it's a Microsoft product, great integration into Office 365. And then from a sales and customer service point of view, for the kind of house building and renovation and sales side, Dynamics was a great fit, Dynamics 365. So again, that fit together, and again, integration wasn't a problem. And because of that integration and that kind of single platform idea, that common database, what that did is minimise all the manual effort that we saw in the before model. Really, we've pushed the customer to use Office 365 to plug the gaps as much as humanly possible. And yes, there's still email, and yes, there's still Excel, but nothing like before, because what we're using now is Power Apps, Power Platform, these types of data gathering tools, using workflow to manage the actual process rather than having individuals having to remember bits and writing on bits of paper or sending emails around. And what that drives is, obviously the core efficiency you get from that and better customer experience, but you get better data and decision making out of that as well. So we've still not made the decision with the customer around whether it's Power BI or ClickSense for them. But really, they're going to get a single platform to sort of pull on that single bit of data. And when they arrive at the board meeting or the ops meeting, they can say, right, this is the data set, this is the view on the data. And that gives them that consistent decision making. So in terms of key takeaways and next actions, before I move into the Q&A section and hopefully get to speak to some of you, this is a very high level summary of the journey from start to finish. And I mean very high level. So the first steps that we like to see is that robust technology strategy, and I'm keen to see the poll results there to see how that maps in. So you need to have a robust organisational strategy first, as we said. Underpinning that, you need to have a robust technology strategy that's published business-wide, and I can't stress that enough. You need to bring everybody in on this journey because you're going to need their expertise. There are going to be processes going on in a department somewhere that you know nothing about, and that's it's really important that you bring everybody on that journey, because you're going to need their knowledge to get the sponsorship, but B, get the tightest fit to your organisation as you can. Once you've got those two building blocks in place, I would encourage you to run a value chain discovery workshop, which any of you that have done any business analysis in the past effectively is understanding the system's cost and effort in performing key processes right now. So pick a department or an area that you think is particularly in need of some attention, that there's potentially ROI there, and actually document what systems are in there, how much do they cost me, how much effort in terms of people and hours does it take to keep those things going and run them. And then what we can do is use that to build your as-is technology architecture diagram, and where your starting point is, as we saw in the previous diagram. And that Art of the Possible workshop is really saying, okay, well, we understand where you are right now and we understand the inefficiencies. So which sort of agile and sustainable compliant technologies could improve each process? So from that kind of Microsoft stack, how could we potentially either replace or overlay or automate that piece? And then what pounds and pence difference would that make to the organisation? What difference would that make to customer experience? What difference would that make to the tenants? And then once you've done that across the piece, it's a case of prioritisation, really. So hopefully after that exercise, you'll have effectively a menu that says old process, new process, and then sort of an ROI against that. And then effectively identify and roll out those quick wins as soon as you can to gain that sponsorship. So key ones that we're seeing from customers early doors in the digital transformations are Office 365 adoption, migration. EDRM is a really popular one at the moment, enterprise documents management, to get that buy-in. Productivity around Teams, obviously we've had a massive increase in that world since the pandemic, but it was already growing before that. Any kind of staff engagement projects where you're trying to bring a centralised culture to your staff, so that could be intranet or anything like that. And then any sort of BI to get the data out of the business. Those are the kind of key ones that are quick wins that we can do at the start. And then once that ball is rolling, it's important to not underestimate the culture change involved in digital transformation. So I'd encourage you to research and understand and adopt a data literate culture. Very easy to say, quite another thing to achieve. But data literacy is a real problem if you read any of the research, in the UK and in the Western world, to be fair, because we've not had access to this level of data before. And usually that means we don't know what to do with it. So data literacy is all about understanding how to use data to inform your decision making correctly. And that is something that you need to address and put a program in place with around training. This point here around digital innovation is a pet one of mine. So once the digital transformation program of work is moving, ideally, yes, it will probably have a fervent period of a few years, to do all of the hard work, but it's never going to go away. It will effectively stay there as a constant thing. Hopefully, once you've broken the back of it, it becomes a lot easier to manage. And once you've broken the back of it, this digitally innovative culture thing is key. If you can, and what I tend to recommend is, you'll probably have champions that you'll be able to spot through the process, perhaps in each department, individuals that have an interest or perhaps are evangelical about technology or understand it, or that you can pick up and say, right, I want to bring these people into a small working group. I like to see those as sort of digitally innovative champions. So bringing them in every month or quarter to discuss what's on the horizon and let them spread that message throughout the organisation is really key. Gather ideas from the coalface, bring it back to the meeting, and then use the technology stack like Office 365 to say, right, this new process is coming in around some new compliance standard that's coming in. How can we deal with that with technology? How can we deal with that without going and buying another third-party solution? Can we mop that up using the stack we've got? That's a real key area. And then that last one there is just that thing around considering using technology as a resource for future issues. And that's about making sure you've got a champion or someone that understands that at all levels. So yes, in a departmental level, but from a hierarchical level as well. Who is that person or people on the line management team? Who is that person or people at a senior management level? So that in 35 minutes is about the fastest I've ever done that. So if I just move on to the next slide, we should be on questions. So over to you, Gary. Any feedback from the guys that we can discuss, or perhaps open the mics up?
No, that was brilliant, Stephen, and well kept the time there. I think the only thing I'd like to comment on first is how close one of those slides looked like Blockbusters, the game show. I think that's me showing my age there, but that was awesome.
I had that comment before. If anyone is a copyright lawyer or Channel 4, please don't tell anyone.
So just before we jump into the questions, what we'll do is we'll relaunch poll number 2, and that's just a question we asked first. The first poll was about organisational strategy and the clarity around that, and this second question, this poll is just about the maturity of your digital technology strategy. Do you have one? Is it in progress, or are you fairly advanced and you have one in place? And then what we can do is just look a little bit at those results in a few minutes. We've actually got one question already, Stephen, so this is from Lorna Colville, and she's just asked if you were able to go into a little bit more detail about Dynamics and Office 365. So beyond the basics, what can it do? I know that's quite an open question, but it's maybe, is there any examples you've had from other clients you've worked with as to what it's done below the surface? That kind of, it's a very much a tip of the iceberg thing in some instances, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose the way I could summarise that briefly is Office 365 as a platform is the biggest area of growth that we've seen in the last 3 years across all sectors, including housing. And the reason for that is there's very little that it can't do. It's unusual for us to come across any business issue where we say, sorry, it can't do that. There are things we would advise against doing. So if somebody came to us and said, build a finance system in Office 365, we would say, no, go and buy a finance system, the one that integrates to Office 365. But the best way of thinking about Office 365 from a high level is back to that sort of after picture that I had, where your before is manual effort, lots of Excel, rekeying, Word templates, physical bits of paper, emails back and forward. You can get rid of that with Office 365. That's the bottom line. So if you've got even a business license. So there's lots of licenses, right? But business is probably the basic one that most will have. You might find people with an enterprise license. So business is roughly £8 or £9 per user per month. Enterprise is anywhere between 15 and 18-ish pounds per month. On either of them, you've got in between 16 apps and 26 apps, and you're probably just using email, OneDrive, maybe Word, Excel, Outlook, that type of thing. There's another dozen or so more apps in there that you've probably not used. So, for example, Teams, which most of us hadn't really dealt with in anger until this year. We had, because we're a technology company, but housing associations, the adoption of Teams has been through the roof. That has been and always was part of Office 365. If you think about something like Planner's another one of those apps which, if you need to manage a team remotely, as we all are right now, and say, right, here's 10 things that this team needs to do by the end of the month, and then divvy that work out, assign tasks, and then as a manager see the progress against that. Planner can do that for you. Free app within the platform. I'm running various digital transformation sessions that I would have done in person with customers. 10 or 15 people around the boardroom, and I'm usually at the front. I'm the guy with the pen and the whiteboard. I'm doing that using Office 365 because there's an app called Whiteboard, which will allow me to sketch on screen. It'll let me drop shapes in, text. I can embed video, capture the whole session as I would, share that digitally so others can edit it at the same time, and then export that after the session to say, there you go, there's your big whiteboard of the session. And I could talk for another hour and a half just on the other apps that are within Office 365. It's vastly, vastly underused. It's an asset that really we specialise in helping customers sweat. SharePoint as a technology is another one. It's a huge area in Office 365. That's a proper enterprise-grade document management system that stands up there with any EDRM system. We're doing between 2 and 4 new EDRM projects in SharePoint and Office 365 for the smallest housing associations right up to the biggest. Again, you're not spending any more money on that as far as a license concerned. It's contained within Office 365. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but that is an area that's well worth opening the lid on and having a look at the detail there. The key thing is, what other business systems or manual processes that are expensive and painful can you replace with the thing you've already got?
No, that was great, Stephen. And I know it's especially, I think from our own point of view at SFHA, we have definitely noticed a kind of vast shift in particularly the culture around how people work. What we're finding is across the staff that they are more actively engaged with a lot of the products. Prior to lockdown, we'd actually implemented our own Office 365 environment setup, and there was, a kind of pushback and a little bit of resistance. So I think from my point of view, I'm kind of interested to ask this question. It's almost like, sometimes they say culture eats strategy for breakfast sometimes, and it was just that, have you any insights into that kind of area around? Do you guys have you seen any good examples of how you've been able to push that kind of culture piece across the whole strategy side of things? How do you get people to embrace it?
Mm-hmm. It's really about bringing everybody on the journey. It's as simple as that. We've seen it done poorly over the years, and we've learned from that. So where it's done poorly is where it's an SMT-led project, and they don't let anybody into that process of defining the technology strategy that we spoke about and defining the programme of work that we spoke about. And basically the majority of the staff, it's just a thing that happens to them, where they get an email out that says, right guys, this is what we're doing. These 5 things are going to happen. We'll be in touch. Those types of programs of work tend to not do well at all. As part of that cultural change, it's important to have a transparent conversation, lots of conversations and workshops with all levels of business, right down to the coalface, to get views, uncover pains and problems. Because with the best will in the world, an SMT or even the line management level, they'll have an inkling about where the real problems lie and where the best ROI they're going to get is. But actually, until they do that exercise, they're not going to really know where the problems lie. And as part of that process, these individuals will feel listened to, and that's where you start to get the kind of cultural change coming in. And again, a good project manager, a good program manager that's done this successfully in the past will be able to identify influential individuals across the business that are hubs of culture in general, who set the tone in a particular office or a particular department, or are respected or looked up to. These are the guys that strategically you should be grabbing and bringing in and encouraging to engage with the process, because if you win those individuals, they'll go back to their department, desk, wherever, and they'll chip away and win arguments for you, hands off, without you touching it. That's how you get that cultural change.
No, that was a good answer, especially for me putting you in the spot there. And I think, yeah, I'm totally going to agree with that. That was something we done as well. As well as that, I think what was also interesting was, by identifying one or two people that were really kind of on the ball, using it well, we pushed them out as the champions, and by them showing other people, it wasn't me, it wasn't the executive team. It was more kind of collaboration across teams. They got a feel for how powerful some of the apps and tools were, and so just to carry on before I just get carried away, we've actually got a question here as well, and it's from Chris Morrison at Hebridean Housing Partnership, and Kirsty's actually jumped in and kind of answered part of the question, but I'm going to just float it to you as well. Mm-hmm. So Chris said, "Hi Stephen, thank you for the presentation. And he's interested in SharePoint and using it as an ERDM, and he's wondering how easy is it to set up an organisation-wide ERDM, covering the multiple teams and using that with housing systems that are already in place." So that's an interesting question in terms of the legacy systems as well.
Yeah, so Kirsty's the expert in that area, so I might ask to unmute her in a second if you could. But the general answer to that is that's a very, very common ask for us, and so much so that we've got an EDRM onboarding and integration framework as part of that. So I can probably name half a dozen, but Kirsty will rhyme off much quicker.
I can unmute myself, Stephen, by the powers of technology. So yeah, thanks for bringing us in there. Yeah, Chris, I have answered in the chat, but absolutely, we're integrating at the moment with various Capita, Civica projects, starting with Orchard and Arian, and work done with MIS with ActiveH. So integration is achievable, and the HMS providers do like to sometimes make things slightly difficult for us, but we're working with and around them where necessary. And it'd be great to explore that further. The devil is in the detail, as I said in the chat, but we're doing so many of these that the process is becoming streamlined, and we're looking at the projects in a way where we repeat these. So again, we're not recreating the wheel every time we build an EDRM.
Yeah, and thanks, Kirsty. And the thing I'd probably add to that is, so that'll be the first thing that you look at as far as core EDRM is, but that opens up so many doors for you. So, for example, one of the customers that we're working with right now that's probably in year 2 of their digital transformation, they've done their EDRM bit, and they're now looking at, right, well, what doors has that opened for me now I've hooked up my HMS to SharePoint and Office 365 for EDRM. They're actually now starting to use the AI technologies that come as part of the whole Office 365 and Azure suite. So they're able to use a technology called Forms Recognizer. So, stuff coming in from land registry, they're able to strip out property code, ratings, reassessment dates, grab those bits of metadata, push that information into the HMS, tag that against the individual document, and then go and automatically file that away. So, I mean, they're saving fortunes as part of that particular project. And like I said, the EDRM, absolutely we can do that, but in terms of year 2, year 3, the doors that opens, there's a huge amount of possibility there.
No, that's great. Thanks for that answer. And what I'm going to try and do is get the results of poll 1 up, just so I can chat through them.
Right, John, and then
so that first poll about clarity of organisational strategy, we had 23% say it's old and it needs revisited and refreshed. The biggest percentage, 46%, said update isn't currently in progress. And so we've got 15% saying they've recently relaunched new organisational strategy, which is interesting. And the same again, 15% say they've now got one embedded. And I guess like it's something I've kind of touched on in previous webinars as well. It's that, you know, if you are under that, in that bracket of it's currently in progress, now is a really good time to actually, what you were saying, Stephen, earlier about accepting that technology as a resource. And if we could get poll 2 up, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. And in conjunction with that, I guess it's safe to say that the biggest percentage there is it's in progress for digital technology strategies. And I think a point I was maybe going to touch on and ask you about as well is that, you know, there is a kind of there's this big, I know there's so many terms getting bandied about at the moment. Is it digital transformation? Is it digital change? Whatever it is, there's this kind of point about technology enablement, which is, you know, the actual tools that you use, but there's that digital enablement part around it's getting the right tools in place to be able to elevate and kind of activate those workforces. So it's just, you know, if there was any tips you had at that initial stage, how do you link your technology strategy to your organizational strategy? Does it start with the leadership? Is it ensuring that they understand that whatever you're trying to do with your organizational strategy, it's most likely going to be done through the digital enablement, the technology enablement that you're putting in place?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that it's most likely that it's going to be you're going to be able to achieve your organizational goals with technology. All I would say is that it should be the first place that you go to check if it can. So if you want your HA to reach another 5,000 properties this year or in the next 3 years, whatever it happens to be, great. That's a stated, measurable organizational goal. When the exec team or the SMT is looking around the table for how do we actually go and do that, all I'm saying is go and speak to whoever it is that's running your tech strategy, and see where tech can take some of the weight, because there will be areas within your technology stack that can help. There will be some organizational goals that you've got that technology will be able to do it all from A to Z. But at the very least, we should be considering that as an option, because it's typically, in general, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's more sustainable, and contributes to your data set, will let you understand that growth for future plans that you're doing, and. So it needs to have its seat at the table, just the same way as you would need to go and hire X more people, Y more premises, you know, Z more operational guys in the field to do the maintenance. It needs to be considered as part of that whole. But it's not a panacea. You know, there's no point in doing technology for technology's sake. All I'm saying is that you should have somebody at that exec level, or at least contributing to that exec decision making, that says, hang on guys, we don't need to hire 30 people here. We can hire 15 and invest in Office 365, or handle our documentation from site better, or whatever.
No, that's great. And again, I've kind of put you in the spot with that one. So we're just about out of time, but there was one more question I wanted to ask. We've not got any more questions coming up just now, and it's actually something SFHA have touched on before, and it's about the pricing and eligibility for whatever framework housing associations sit on. Currently, it's looking very much likely that all housing associations will be on that government framework banding. And I know you mentioned there just very briefly about the different types of licenses. So, you know, in general, pricing wise, are you seeing, you know, the efficiencies there? Is that something that's been one of the kind of key factors so far? You know, fair enough, it is an outlay at the beginning, and when you start stacking multiple things on top of each other, they can kind of build up quite quickly, but it's a long-term investment.
Yes, and whatever Microsoft decide on the licensing thing long term, who knows? They'll make the decision, and the decision will be the decision. Like you said, it's looking like government pricing is the way it's going to go for the moment through an EA. That said, I have had the debate, and I'm more than happy to have the debate with anybody, that even if you went for the E3, the not quite the cream of the crop license, but one of the more expensive licenses for Office 365, for example, so like £17.10, I think it is, per user per month. I would argue with anybody that is the best £17.10 per user that you will ever spend, just because of the amount that you get for 17 quid. It's a phenomenal amount of technology that constantly upgrades, is completely secure, handles all of your compliance, and gets better all the time. They add to it. I mean, it's 17 quid for all of that is the best 17 quid you'll ever spend. Added to that, they will let you mix and match your licenses now, which they didn't before. So a couple of years ago, kind of quite quietly, they linked up all of these areas. So if you've got 500 staff, you can have 100 of your desk-based guys on the 17 quid license, 150 of the kind of line managers who are in and out on a 9 quid license, and then your guys in the field that only need to access SharePoint for files, submit a Power Apps form for their block inspections, and, you know, submit a health and safety problem if somebody breaks something. You can license them for 3 quid, 380.
Exactly.
So you can get quite clever with the licensing, so that it's as efficient as it's going to be, but the ROIs are so easy to have on the basis of 3 quid to 17 quid purely for Office 365. I just think it's cheap for the value you get.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that was good. You made that point about the flexibility. That was definitely what we found. So just to round off, there was 2 other things I was quickly going to mention. I don't really want to get into, but from a personal point of view, what we've also found, you know, that kind of below the tip of the iceberg with Office 365 in the Microsoft environment, that there's actually loads of online training as well as support that's included in there, so people can effectively solve their own problems. They can go through tutorials on how to use specific apps as well. And for us especially, we had one GDPR issue, and what we found is the actual process of going through the steps involved in that data subject request, it was vastly quicker through the process of Office 365 admin. So that's just 2 other little points to throw into the mix. What I'd like to do today, Stephen, is just thank you for your time. That's been great. Hopefully a lot of the attendees got something out of that. And if you do have any other questions, we'll be in touch. SFH will be in touch shortly to put out some other details, and you can follow up that way. So once the recording is made available, we'll let everybody know again. And just to say thank you to TSG and Stephen again. And please do look out for a few more events coming up, most likely in the new year now, but we'll be trying to follow on from this session to dig a bit deeper into some of those topics.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.